I am an American who went to Ukraine and joined the International Legion last year. I spent 6 months in Ukraine, and I still strongly support the Ukrainian people and their cause, fighting for their freedom and, frankly, for our freedom. We're trying to help our fellow Americans understand that this is our fight, not just Ukraine's, and fundraising to buy critical equipment for Ukrainian soldiers.
This is an all-hands-on-deck moment for humanity to support the brave Ukrainian people while they fight and sweat and bleed and freeze and die for all of us. So I would ask your listeners to please consider my words carefully and turn off the TV, set down the beer, turn off the sports, stop doom scrolling on your phone, and get off the couch and get in the fight.
Бо наша воля, то є наша кров, повітря нашої сили джерело, свободи сонце більше не зайде, і Україна була, є й буде.
Hello and welcome to Talking Ukraine podcast. I'm here today with Carl Larson. Carl's driving down on his way to San Francisco. He is originally from Seattle, and he is an American veteran who spent 4.5 months as a soldier in the International Legion of Ukraine in 2022. He returned in August 2022 from several months at the front in eastern Ukraine, and he's got a marketing job, but he's also doing some initiatives to get support for Ukraine. One is called the Defense Tech for Ukraine, and also the European Action for Ukraine. And I met you, Carl, here in Munich when he was doing his European tour. And so finally we're able to catch up here on my podcast. And, I'm curious, Carl, how did you end up going to Ukraine? I mean, not, being American with no Ukrainian ties probably beforehand.
Right.
What were you doing when the war started, and then what inspired you to and motivated you to get out there?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your podcast, Damien, and it was an honor to meet you and your wife in Munich a month ago. That was our, I think, fourth time in Western Europe. We've got this regular delegation where we go and we meet with lawmakers in the German Bundestag and the European Parliament and the French Assembly Nationale and Senate, and advocate for Ukraine. And we also meet with defense manufacturers. And we were at the Munich Security Conference and met with David Petraeus and met with a number of other investment firms helping Ukraine, and just identifying opportunities to help Ukraine that others aren't doing. And so I'm very honored to be part of this international all hands on deck moment for humanity here to support the brave Ukrainian people, and honored to be on your podcast. So to answer your question, so why did I do this? Why did I put my physical safety and my financial security and everything else on the line for a country that is not mine and that I honestly had no plans to visit? I heard nice things about Ukraine. I also heard some not nice things about Ukraine, but I certainly would have visited in the past if I'd had a reason to spend that time in Eastern Europe, but it wasn't high on the list. However, in February 2022, during the full-scale invasion, and important to point out to people, that wasn't the start of the war. The war started in 2014. But the full-scale invasion started in 2022, and as everyone remembers, it was quite a bucket of cold water in the face for everyone all around the world, especially after Putin's repeated lies about not invading Ukraine. It's amazing that anybody believes anything that guy would say. At that time, I took a hard look at my my life and my skills and my desire to write my name in the history books and do something very important with my life. And I have a certain set of skills from my time 20 years ago in the U.S. Army. I did serve a year in Iraq as a combat engineer, so I do know a thing or two about life in a war zone. Although I will say it was quite a different war, and then in every conceivable way. Not in every conceivable. There was some shared experiences, but And then, I'm in pretty good physical shape, pretty good financial shape, or at least I was at the time. And I got a 6 month leave of absence from my job and a 6 month leave of absence from my wife. And so I decided that I would go over and play a small role. And I went over, actually, originally, it's kind of funny. I went over to babysit these two guys who were going to join the Legion. I was not going to join the Legion. And then, of course, you know how these stories end up. Like they chickened out and went home, and I ended up joining the Legion. Right? It's funny, but anyway, that's how it is. And so, yeah, I just looked at what Putin was doing in Ukraine, and I instantly knew what took the policymakers and the think tank folks a few weeks or months to mull over and identify, which is that this is the fate of Western civilization here. If Putin gets his way in Ukraine, it destroys the post-World War II order, which is based on the concept that countries cannot take the land of another country by force. That's what all of our prosperity is based on. That's what all of our success, all of our happiness is based on. If countries can do that, then we're going to have ceaseless wars, devastation, just human rights abuses, massacres, murders, famine, just all kinds of negative consequences for humanity if we let Putin get away with this. And so I drew a lot of my inspiration from the actions of the international volunteers in the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s. You know, George Orwell, Ernest Hemingway, and others who went to fight for the cause of freedom in Spain. And I like to think that, if I'd been alive if I'd been of fighting age in the 30s, I would have gone and fought in Spain. I know for a fact if I was fighting age in the 1940s, I would have fought the German Nazis. But I'm alive now, and so I went to go fight the Russian Nazis. That's my answer to that question. Hope that answered
Yeah,
it.
yeah. No, that you think a lot of people would feel this way. Just
You'd
average
think so.
people and Americans and I mean, you're saying like this, that the territorial integrity is what, like fosters our civilization really. And
Yep.
Russia broke that back in 2014.
Yep.
That's when we, the world, the West sort of allowed Russia and opened the door, creaked open the door then for that. And obviously we're seeing now, I think the results that we're sort of like on the brink of World War III at the, as we're recording this in some ways. Um, but what was, what when you got to Ukraine and what, I don't know, is there anything you can share like from your time being actually in the Legion and fighting the Russians? I mean, any takeaways or
Well,
anything you'd like to?
there's a lot to share. I mean, I'm writing a book about it, and there's 12 chapters. I mean, it was a short but very, very intense and surreal and just mind-blowingly strange experience of my period of my life. I had guys die right next to me, like their blood all over me. And I never killed nobody, but not for lack of trying. And it was we fought the Russians. We fought our leadership. Unfortunately, there was some real problems in the leadership, and we fought the lack of equipment and the lack of we didn't have lack of training, but we didn't have enough training and not the right kind of training. We did have some good training, but we sure as hell didn't have anywhere near enough equipment, and we didn't have enough ammunition. We didn't have enough orders, and we didn't have good enough leadership. So it was quite the challenge. It was quite the struggle. I'll tell you, going to war is not like Hollywood, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. I've successfully talked about a dozen guys out of going to Ukraine and fighting. I've helped like three of them go there and do that. Two of whom are still alive, I will say. But the other dozen, I consider that a success as well, because it's really not an easy life, not just physically and not just financially, but also mentally. It's pretty tough, pretty brutal life.
Wait,
So yeah, I mean, I can give you more examples if you want.
well, I was going to say, do you think that, in the initial sort of first few months, there were guys coming in there who was just sort of looking for purpose and romanticizing the idea of like
Oh, yeah.
what it would be like, being, fighting in a war or being part of an army? I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
where were a lot of the guys from? Were there Americans there, or were they
oh
from
yeah.
all over?
So I mean, okay, so this I need a whiteboard to properly explain this, right? So I actually had a very unique and interesting perspective because I did not join the Legion right away. Me and those other two guys, we crossed the Polish border on March 8th, 2022, and we went to a Legion recruitment center. And the recruiter he was kind of weird, but whatever, it was all right. Recruits were just fucking insane. Like they were all criminals and drug addicts and like all face tattoos or mafiosa sorts or like just like mentally ill and just like, oh yeah, I came here so I could get off my cocaine addiction, or yeah, the judge told me I was either here or go to jail, or just shit like that. And we're like, oh my God, this is horrible. So we left and we went and we tried to volunteer as like armed security guards, and we did try to do a casualty evacuation. We went to Uzhhorod and we volunteered at like a big refugee center, and we did all this stuff for 3 weeks. And finally they got discouraged and they left, and I met up with some other guys, and so I went and I actually at a different recruitment center, and we started screening out those horrible people, right, who had no business holding a weapon. You definitely wouldn't want to share a foxhole with these guys. And over time, we got the system dialed in to the point where we were starting to get only pretty good recruits. And I was really proud of playing a small role in that. And I became pretty good friends with the Ukrainian recruiters, and they were good guys, and they understood these problems. And over time, the training got better, and the recruitment process got better. And then we got a really good, really experienced former first sergeant in the U.S. Army Infantry, 11 Bravo First Sergeant. His name's Brad Crawford. He went by Top because that's U.S. Army lingo for a first sergeant. And so Top was he knew his shit. And instantly you talk to this guy for 5 minutes, you're like, oh, okay, this guy knows his shit. And so he was appointed the company commander. No, he was going to be the company commander, and then he was appointed the platoon commander. And so I knew at that point, I'm like, all right, this guy, I might die under him, but he's going to make sure my death would mean something, right? He's not going to just throw me away. All right, I trust this guy. So I signed up, I took the oath, I signed the paper. And then 2 hours before the bus left for the training center from the recruitment center, the Ukes pulled us into their office. They pulled me into the office and they said, Grinch, because that was my call sign. We have bad news and we have worse news. I'm like, oh, great. What's the bad news? And they're like, Bradley go to train Ukrainian. He taken by command staff, by high command. Like, oh, great. Our platoon commander has been poached to go train Ukrainians. Well, that sucks. And then I'm like, well, what's the worst news? And they're like, we need new platoon commander. And I was like, oh, great. So, yeah, you can imagine how that worked. So, and then we had 5 weeks of training. It was crazy. 5 weeks of training. So we had so much training that a good quarter of the 35 guys in the platoon left because they got not bored, but like they wanted to go fight. They had joined the Legion to go fight. And a lot of them were like me. They only had limited time off their jobs and off their marriages. So they left the unit to go fight because we were stuck in training for 5 weeks. But the good thing is that 5 weeks really brought the platoon together. We kicked out some bad guys, and we really like meshed as a unit. We were much tighter and much more reinforced and supportive than some of the other platoons, which really had some major problems. I don't think we ever had a fist fight in our platoon, even though there was some disagreements. And there were, guys did their jobs. They bitched and moaned. That's fine. That's normal. What is it? Patton said he doesn't mind soldiers bitching. It's when they stop bitching that he gets worried. But nobody didn't do their job, and I think I attribute that to those 5 weeks of training. But anyway, so that's the story of how I got to see from the beginning the improvement of the Legion. Now, unfortunately, the swan song is that the Legion no longer exists. Just a few months ago, the ZCU, the Ukrainian military, dissolved the Legion and parceled out the different battalions to other units. I don't remember which ones. I got them written down at home. But basically, the Legion is no more. Now it's just little international platoons in bigger organizations. So, and I understand why they did that.
Was it just to have a sort of like a central command within the Ukrainian armed forces?
So there are several reasons. One reason, as I said earlier, is that the Legion did not have good leadership, and the Ukrainians hate to demote bad leaders. They hate doing that. They would much rather transfer them, or in this case, transfer the entire unit. The other reason is that internationals are kind of weird in that we can leave at any time. So it's the only military unit in the world, and I think the history of the world, where anybody can at any time throw down their rifle and walk, which is problematic in a number of different ways, right?
Did that happen? Did you?
And so, oh yeah, all the time. Are you kidding? All
Yeah.
the time. Because like I said, we had bad leadership and just shit for equipment and supplies. And it was just crazy. Like guys are like, okay, I've gone 4 days without water. I'm drinking out of the stream. When am I going to get some water? When we deliver. You know, keep watching the road. Ask civilians for water. Okay, I'm done with this. I'm leaving. Goodbye. You know, I saw it all over, all the time, all the time. Or like, wait, you want me to guard this road with an RPG and you say there's 2 tanks coming? Well, give me an NLAW. Give me a javelin. We only have RPG for you. Stay and stop tank. No, I'm out of here. Forget it. Right? And so that's called breaking contract. And that it was so prevalent and so problematic that eventually they instituted a 6-month blacklist. And so what that means is if you join a unit, you have to stay for 6 months. If you quit within the 6 months, you can't join most other units. But the secret is you can actually join. There are other units that'll take you.
How did your time in Ukraine, you know, in the battalion there end? Like, how did you decide, like, it was time for you to get out?
Well, there was like 5 different reasons, man. So I was at the end of my 6 months, and then also there was problems with corruption. So there's a sergeant major, and he's still. I mean, I guess the unit's been disbanded now, but he's probably causing similar problems in a new unit. But this guy, I'll say his name, Nicholas Bardiuk, I believe. But he went by Mikola is his real name, Mikola Bardiuk. But he was the sergeant major in first platoon or first battalion, and the guy was only 26 years old, obesely fat. He was in the position because he had some relative who was some general. I mean, he was 26 years old and a sergeant major, and with virtually no experience. And that wasn't the problem. The problem was that he kept stealing everything. He stole so much stuff that they ended up moving the supply room out of the battalion to another place where only a lieutenant had access to it because this guy kept stealing stuff. So anyway, I pointed this out and I filed a report. And of course, he tried to make things miserable for me. He sent me to go dig fighting positions off at a frontline position. And eventually I was like, all right, I'm digging fighting positions here. And oh yeah, I had a medical appointment in town. I got to go to the medical appointment. Plus, at the time I was the assistant intel to the intel chief, and he's requested me to come back. So and then it was just the guy was causing so many problems, and I could see that it plus I had some health problems. It was at 5 months anyway. It was about time for me to go home. So anyway, it was a combination of factors.
Yeah. I mean, it's too bad that I guess that corruption exists within the army and that there's no real leverage to sort of like contain it.
Well, there is, but there's very much a focus on stopping it. But the commanders are very smart, and they're very like people like this Mikola guy were very careful about not getting caught. The Our commander in First Battalion, Taras, he's dead now, and good riddance. But he wouldn't steal anything personally, but he had these 5 drivers working for him, and 3 of them we know would steal stuff. So you guys would have stuff in their cars, and then they'd come back to the car, and the stuff would be missing. So they mainly stole. He mainly stole night vision, and then they would sell it on the Ukrainian version of eBay or whatever. And I'm sure if Taras was sitting here next to me, he would say, "Yes, we took night vision, but we used it to pay for ammunition, or we used it to pay for shovels, or we used it to pay for this or that or whatever." He'd, I'm sure, justify it in some way or another, because the fact of the matter is, there's just not enough equipment. It's miserable. You're literally watching your buddies die because they don't have enough equipment. Just simple shit like shovels and generators and working vehicles. It's horrible. It's just this most sinking feeling. And I dealt with that by spending a lot of money. I spent $48,000. I just put it on my credit cards. But a lot of guys don't have that capability, and so they just have to watch their buddies literally die as a result. So I'm not trying to justify corruption. I'm just saying that the situation is a little complicated, and it's very, very difficult when you're in that situation.
Do you think it's gotten better now in terms of equipment and having those sort of like basics covered?
No.
No.
I think that a lot of units have figured out that they have to fundraise themselves, so they've thrown up websites and donation portals and gotten on Instagram and started bragging about their work and their fundraising. But still, the vast majority of equipment is funded by donors within Ukraine, which is crazy. I mean, there's thousands of pro-Ukraine groups all over the world that generate hundreds of millions of dollars, probably billions actually, but it's still not anywhere near enough. Most Ukrainian units are woefully under-equipped. Like every Ukrainian soldier gets 4 things. He gets a rifle and ammo and 4 magazines, rifle and 4 magazines, armor and some sort of carrier for it. He gets a helmet and he gets an IFAK. He gets a first aid kit. Every single one always gets that, all 4. They don't send them to the front without those 4 things. But he may not get a backpack. He may not get boots. He may be wearing tennis shoes in the snow, right? He may not get a uniform. He may not get pouches for his ammo. I saw Ukrainian soldiers holding their ammo in shopping bags. I saw them, riding to work, riding to the front lines in the back of a dump truck in the dump bowl. They were riding, and it was towing a car. And it was like there was like 20 cars, and they all looked like they were about to fall apart. And one of them was being towed by the dump truck, and there were guys in the car being towed. Like it was stuffed full of guys. And that's very common. I've seen Ukrainian soldiers in the snow wearing tennis shoes. I've seen them wearing like black clothing that has been spray painted brown, so it'll be camouflage, right? I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. I guess you left sort of like on a sour note, let's say. What keeps you engaged? Like, why are you still engaged? Like, I mean, how did you feel after that? And where did your story go from there?
Well, I was a little pissed off at certain people, I'm not going to lie, but I mean, it doesn't change the fact that this is still the most important thing happening in the world. And there's a lot of crazy stuff happening in the world right now. Well, less so at the time. Now we got all sorts of stuff going on in Gaza and Iran and all that, but still, it's the most important thing happening in the world. And I feel very strongly that the Ukrainians are fighting for us. I'm not Ukrainian. I don't, have any Ukrainian ancestry, or I had a few Ukrainian friends like anyone, but I didn't speak Ukrainian. Now I can get by in Ukrainian. I speak tactical Ukrainian, but they're fighting for us. They're fighting for America. They're fighting for Western Europe. They're fighting for the future of civilization. And if we want to not have a fascist authoritarian future where the world is divided up amongst warring tribes, then it's our duty as right-thinking individuals. For those of us who are Christian, it's our duty to support Ukraine. For those of us who are Christian, we believe that we'll be judged, on the final day, and we want to. I know what I'll have to say when I'm judged, and I hope that others will have a good answer to the ultimate arbiter as well. Or to put it in more layman's terms, your grandkids are someday going to ask you what you did during the war, and I'll have a good answer for them. Anyway, so yeah, despite my challenges with the Ukrainian military, and I certainly had many, I still very much supporting the Ukrainian people in their fight. No culture is perfect, right? American culture has problems. German culture has problems. We still have to support them, I think.
Well, yeah. And why do you think, I mean, what you're saying, it seems like such a black and white situation there, and what you're saying, um, I I would think that most Americans would agree with you, but it seems that there's a lot of people who don't support Ukraine in America, or the MAGA movement in general um, doesn't, or like there's people who support Russia, who's always traditionally an enemy, and I don't know, like even like all these Christians, like they're not really stepping up and at least vocalizing that they support Ukraine in the way that you would expect, given the truth of like the evil that's being perpetrated on the Ukrainians who are just trying to, live their lives and raise their families and be a free democratic society. Like do you have any like take on like why this is and when you saying that they're fighting for us, I don't think a lot of people see it that way. They just feel like it's a war somewhere out there and it doesn't have anything to do with us. I don't know. Do you have any sense of why that is, or at least in the States, why like such a big part, like Republicans historically supported Ukraine and were against the Soviet Union, but now the Republican Party seems to be a lot more pro-Russian.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pity that John McCain's not still alive. He'd definitely have a thing or two to say about that. I mean, there's several reasons why American and international support has not been as effective in supporting Ukraine. In America, it takes form of people just, I don't know, not supporting Ukraine. In Europe, it's more along the lines of people talking, saying they support Ukraine, but not actually doing anything, which is no offense to any Europeans listening to this, but Europe and Europeans are very good at doing this and not very good at doing this. And we're trying to change that with the European Action for Ukraine group. So if anybody listening to this wants to get involved in advocacy for Ukraine in Berlin, London, or Paris, or just in those countries, I should say, please let me know, or sign up on the European Action for Ukraine.org website. But so let's look at each slice of the pie and figure out why there's not sufficient European or international support for Ukraine. The most obvious reason for a large portion of the lack of support is Russian propaganda. And so anybody who has done any research on Russian, and before that Soviet, and before that Russian again, active measure. There's many, the New York Times has done a deep dive on it. The Atlantic has many reputable news organizations have looked into it. I mean, Russia has been at war with the United States for over 100 years, ever since we backed the that's called the White faction, which was the monarchist, or it was monarchist slash democratic, basically non-Bolshevik faction in the Civil War. And we actually had American troops in Far East Russia, and or I guess at that point you'd call it the Soviet Union. And the Soviets never really forgot that. They were very clear-eyed about who they thought their enemies were, and then they have always been attacking us using hybrid warfare. That's the word I was looking for, hybrid warfare. Even when they weren't engaged in, direct physical kinetic war. And so, they, even before Soviet doctrine was fully adopted, they've been anti-America. I mean, there was a brief period during the Second World War where supposedly we were all friends and everything, but let's not forget that this was just a few years after they were supposedly all friends with Hitler. And okay, Hitler invaded Russia first, but you can be sure that the Soviet Union was planning to double cross them as well, just like they double crossed Poland, and they mercilessly brutalized and divided that country up between them. So the Soviets have never been trustworthy, and the Russians have never been trustworthy. And the fact of the matter is, they've been deploying their extremely effective propaganda efforts against the United States and against Western Europe, and frankly, against Africa, Latin America, and Asia as well. Less so in Asia, but very effectively in Latin America and Africa. They've been doing that for decades, for almost 100 years. They're very good at it. And people in the West have this antiquated notion of propaganda. When we think of propaganda, we think of just like, a poster on the wall, support this guy, or America's bad, no, their propaganda is so much more sophisticated, so effective. And really what it does is it doesn't, at the basic level, they support the far left and the far right, and they want to amplify existing fissures in society, in German society, in Polish society, in American society, and they do that very effectively. I mean, why would they want to fight us when they could make us fight ourselves, right? It's perfect. Yeah. That's Sun Tzu. That's Warfare 101, and that's Clausewitz. That's Sun Tzu. That's table stakes. It's basic. But at a deeper level, what they really do is they support candidates. I mean, I could say some things about the election of Donald Trump here, but I won't, because I don't want to raise any hackles of anybody who supports him. Hey, we work with pro Trump. We work with MAGA people. We'll work with anybody on the left or the right as long as they support Ukraine. That's our policy. But Russian propaganda, they support candidates that support Russia, and at its most subversive, most effective level, Russian propaganda attacks foreign populations, just understanding of logic and truth and reality, basic reality. When Russian propaganda really is most effective is in making people doubt their own five senses and just retreat from involvement in public policy, hate their government, hate their politicians, and really, at the end of the day, hate themselves, really, and just live in a negative world of loathing and really primitive, tribal, animalistic fear and self-loathing. Really, that's what the eventual goal is. Because people who are in that state are not strong, they're not united. They're not looking at the true enemy. They're not positive. They're not effective adversaries, which is, of course, Putin doesn't want effective adversaries. So the propaganda is very effective. So that's number one reason why so many Americans and Europeans are not as involved and not as supportive of Ukraine. Number two, I would say it is a faraway war, and it is not as immediately affecting Americans as we might think. It certainly does affect Europeans, and we did notice Europeans do seem to be much more head in the game than Americans. Unfortunately, Europeans, like I say, they do a lot of this, and they're very supportive of, let's say, refugees and humanitarian aid and rebuilding efforts. Oh, if you talk to Germans, they love talking about rebuilding Ukraine. They're all about spending hundreds of millions of euros and rebuilding. Who the hell cares? Let's win the war before we talk about rebuilding. And so there's some problems there. In America, we do have these two big oceans, and it's not as immediately consequential. It is consequential, as we've pointed out. But we have to make that case to the American people and keep making it, because war fatigue is a real thing. As we discussed, there's a lot of other things happening in the world. This war has gone on it's now gone on for as long as American involvement in World War II, right? We were only involved for 4 years, so now it's gone on as long. And it's probably, in my estimation, going to go on for another couple of years. it's going to go on until basically the Russian or the Ukrainian economy collapses. And with this $90 billion loan for Ukraine by the Europeans, the Ukrainians are going to be in this fight for a while. So now all eyes are on the Russian economy. Unfortunately, the Russian economy just got a big boost in the arm from Trump's removing these sanctions, so that sucks. But anyway, so that's number two is the faraway nature of the war. Number three, Russia has successfully managed to position itself to a lot of people, a lot of conservative people in the U.S. and in the West and in Europe, and especially Christians, as a defender of the faith, defender of traditional values, and I would say Christian traditional values do not include murder and rape and the invasion of neighboring countries and lies and propaganda and just misery, human misery. I don't believe that's a Christian value at all. But I will say that there are some trends in the West that help make this case and help give Putin ammunition for this positioning that he's trying to brand his country as. And so, I wish that that Americans and Western Europeans would maybe back off a little bit on, say, the whole trans thing. Maybe secure the borders. Why not? What's the matter with secure borders? I like secure borders. Maybe lower taxes and regulation in Western Europe a little bit, make things a little easier for businesses in Western Europe. It seems like there's some things that could be improved to kind of take the wind out of Putin's sails, right? And so those are three concrete reasons why there is not as much support for Ukraine in 2026 as, say, there was for Great Britain in 1940 or 1941 before Pearl Harbor. I always compare support for Ukraine now to support for Great Britain before Pearl Harbor because to me, it's very similar situations. Hope that answers the question.
I think there's also sort of, at least in the general public, there's sort of like short attention span and burnout and Ukraine war fatigue. I mean, obviously, Russia's sending drones and missiles every week to different parts of Ukraine, and people are getting killed, and civilians are getting killed. And when that used to happen, you used to hear about it on the news, and now it's like you don't even see about it in the Western press anymore, and it's just
nobody cares.
A normal
really sad.
thing. Yeah. So that's another thing that's it's quite discouraging. I mean, just how much people have become disengaged from actually like being able to feel sympathy anymore or empathy, or I've disengaged sort of from what's happening.
You could say that's a problem in society in general. I mean, it's the TikTok generation, right? I remember when there were 4 channels on the TV, and now we live in the golden age of content. You have instant gratification. Any television show you've ever wanted to watch on any topic, I could sit there on YouTube for all day and all night. It's just incredible. And we live in a more or less an age of abundance. We can order anything we want on Amazon and have it in our house the next day. And there's some financial problems and economic difficulties, but realistically, people have a pretty good life. And so it's unfortunate that has conditioned people to not pay attention to what's really important. There's this old saying, hard times create strong men, and strong men create good times, and good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times.
Sounds logical.
And it's true.
Yeah. You can go back to, your life in Seattle and live a good life, your normal life, and disengage. But, I met you here in Munich in Germany because you were activating for Ukraine's interests. And so can you, I'm sort of curious, like, still, at this point, what keeps you doing that? And also, can you talk a bit about your trip here in Europe and what you experienced and like who you met with and what your takeaways were? Or what did you feel you made progress, or was it frustrating? Like, did you achieve what you wanted to achieve?
Well, you never get everything. What is it? The Stones said you can't always get what you want, but you find and try sometimes you get what you need. So yeah, I mean, we learned a lot over the 3 weeks. There was about almost a dozen of us in various parts of the delegation. It was mainly political advocacy, so we were meeting with a lot of a lot of members of parliament, German, French, European Union. We didn't make it to the UK this time, unfortunately, and we learned that this sort of grassroots advocacy, A, it really works and it's needed, and B, nobody's doing it. So we're definitely going to do that. That's through our sister group, European Action for Ukraine. If people want to get involved, go to europeanactionforukraine.org and sign up, or just message me. And we learned it's very needed. We also talked to a lot of defense innovators and investors, and we learned that there's some real opportunities to help Ukraine. So that's great. It's part of the reason why I'm driving 14 hours to get to San Francisco to go to this investor roadshow. Before everybody comments on this saying, why didn't he just fly? Well, I have family in the middle that I wanted to visit. Plus, I get to make a lot of phone calls this way, and I'm picking up my buddy on the way. He's going to go. He's on the leadership at DTU. So it's going to be like 5 of us there. It's going to be great. We're going to meet a bunch of donors and investors and stuff. So it's going to be a really good experience. But so it was a very valuable time in Western Europe. We got a lot done. It was very well worth going. We'll be doing more delegations to Western Europe over the next few months once we get our office set up in downtown Kyiv. Then I anticipate Johnny and I anticipate taking a lot of trips to Copenhagen and Berlin and Paris and London. Maybe down there to Munich too. We'll see. I would encourage your listeners to get involved. There's many ways that ordinary people can get involved. If people want to put their engineering skills or programming or AI or project management or other hard skills, let's say, into practice, they can go sign up with the Defense Tech for Ukraine website, and we'll put them to work on a project. Or if they're an investor who wants to invest in Ukrainian defense tech, we've got deep networks there. We can, do profit and loss analyses, scalable time to revenue analyses. We actually have Ukrainian military units standing by to test prototypes and evaluate if they're actually effective or not. We can go and do factory tours. We can go and meet the teams. We can review the accounting books, blah, 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 blah. So that's all on the Defense Tech for Ukraine side. And then our sister group, European Action for Ukraine. Again, that's all political advocacy. If anybody wants to get involved, ramping up support for Ukraine in Western Europe, that'd be the group to get in touch with.
Well, I was going to ask you about Defense Tech Ukraine. What is that initiative? I mean, and have you been where have you been raising money, and what do you do if it's not something you already mentioned?
Sure. So DTU, Defense Tech for Ukraine, is a 400-person, all volunteer staffed nonprofit. It's registered 501c3, registered in the States, and we function like a tech incubator that supports Ukrainian defense technology, either primarily manufacturers in Ukraine or defense manufacturers outside of Ukraine, but that are helping with the war effort. We don't just help any defense manufacturer; they got to be helping Ukraine. And we have I'd say about 24 projects of our own in-house DTU projects. We got some really exciting. We've got an acoustic drone detector it's been successfully combat tested. We're looking to scale that. It's a mesh network system that's a low cost. Soldiers can just throw it out in front of their trenches, and then it'll detect incoming drones, especially the fiber optic drones, which are undetectable by other means and unjammable. So those are really deadly. So we're really excited about that. There's a couple other in-house projects that are really exciting. People want to learn about them and get involved in them, they can just sign up on the website. We'll have a little phone call with them, a little background check, and then we'll plug them into our signal groups. And as far as funding, we've gotten, I don't want to say exactly how much. Uh, More than 5 figures, let's say, more than 5 figures donated, and it's all donations right now. Like I said, we don't take any salaries. We pay for just about everything ourselves. The funds go for projects and just keeping the website up and stuff like that. And then as far as investments, we just have the investors. We connect them directly to the manufacturers, and then they just handle that directly. The investors can hire us if they want to hire us to do evaluations, to review accounting, to do a factory tour, to have the Ukrainian military units evaluate products, things like that. Then they can hire us to do that. But otherwise, our goal is to ramp up the flow of Western investment into Ukraine as much as possible, and not stand in the way, not act as impediments in any way. We want to reduce friction and ramp up investing. So that's DTU. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I'm sort of curious your take on this, given you're involved with, military technology and drone technology. Like in the last days, there's sort of been this little bit back and forth where like, oh, America has requested some, Ukrainian experts or, like experience with anti-drones and fighting off drones because America doesn't quite have, they're shooting these drones from Iran with these expensive missiles. And then, Zelensky's like, yeah, we're sending a team over. And then Trump in an interview recently was like, oh, we don't need the Ukrainians' help. We got all the tech. We got the best in the world, typical
Right,
Trump
of
bluster.
course.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, having sort of been familiar with like this world, this industry, I mean, does Ukraine have something to offer? What is like the cutting edge
Of
tech?
course. Therefore, all the Gulf states are furiously importing Ukrainian drone. I just have some drone buddies who are like, I can't talk to you for a month. I'm going to be out of contact in the Middle East. I got a bunch of buddies who are, they're shipping drone experts to UAE and Qatar and Saudi and Kuwait. Of course, is Ukrainian tech going to replace Patriots? No, but it fulfills a extremely important need that American defense tech does not fulfill. We're very good at making small numbers of extremely expensive, cutting edge, advanced military tech that relies on 10-year-long development cycles, and that's right now, that is effective because we throw hundreds of billions, if not actually trillions. No, we spend trillions. The last DoD budget was $1 trillion at this. So yeah, it's effective. I mean, look at what's going on in Iran. It is effective, but it's not scalable to fight a near peer adversary. Iran is not a near peer adversary. Russia and China are near peer adversaries. If we fought a war with China right now, we would lose. All the analyses, everybody who studies this stuff, all the American experts, the generals and admirals, they say we would lose because our technology is not properly calibrated to fight an attritional war with a near peer adversary. And so we have a huge hole in our defensive capabilities. I would argue that all of NATO has a huge hole. And when it comes to low cost, large quantities of especially interceptor technology and anti-drone technology, and the Ukrainians have, paid with a lot of blood for this cutting-edge technology, and they're very generously giving it away for practically for free to these countries that need it. And I think the whole world owes Ukraine a thank you and a debt of forgiveness, for doing this. And you can see how good-hearted the Ukrainian people are when they really need this technology, at home, and they're giving it away selflessly to these. I mean, they're not giving it away; they're charging for it, but they're not charging outrageous money. They're not making a lot of money. They're basically doing this as a goodwill gesture because they're hoping for support down the road from these countries, and I hope they get it. They sure deserve it. But anyway, there's don't ask me to explain why Trump says this or Trump says that. That's a whole different conversation that should probably be done offline. But we definitely need Ukrainian defense tech is the short answer.
What are interceptor drones? I mean, for someone who's not aware, I mean, what are they? They're drones, small drones that that can target bigger drones that are being launched as an attack.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's many different types of interceptor drones. And a drone to intercept an FPV is going to be different than a drone to intercept a Shahed, right? So there's a lot of drones that intercept, like a 10-inch FPV or a Mavic, something like that, and they do that primarily through shooting a net or through physically ramming them. They have a ton of these. The Russians have been building them for years. They really got it dialed in. And so for those, the Ukrainians use faster FPV drones. They still use FPV drones because they're highly maneuverable, and they'll go up behind them, and they usually ram them because when you get going real fast, a net it doesn't work very well. If you shoot it, it's just going to foul the drone that's shooting it, right? Unless you can get in front of the other drone, which is very unlikely. And so they usually ram those drones. And then to scale it up again are Shaheds, anti-Shahed interceptors, I should say. And Shaheds are quite large. If you've ever seen a Shahed, they're, I believe, 9 feet tall. I saw one in and they keep getting bigger and bigger, right? I saw one in an office in Kyiv, and it was just gargantuan. And, it takes a lot to knock those things down, right? There's many times they get hit by a lot of machine gun fire and they still fly. And so usually they are knocked down by explosive detonation, right? So you've got to fly your drone up and actually hit it and actually kamikaze blow up. And most of them now are too fast to be attacked by a regular FPV, like a 10-inch FPV. That you can't. The Shaheds are too fast. And so the way the Ukrainians are bringing them down now is with what's called bullet drones. And the bullet drones, they look like a bullet, and they have the 4 propellers. They're small propellers, real fast propellers, and they face forward, right? And so the way that the drone, like a normal FPV, it flies. I wish I could show you. I got one in the back here. I could show you.
Like a plane, and you're talking about these. Yeah. These are more like a helicopter.
Yeah. Or they're like a rocket. They're like a rocket because they fly like a bullet, right? And they take off vertically and they fly, 300 kilometers an hour. They're really fast. They're also extremely difficult to fly, as you can imagine, right? I would take a type of interceptor drones for different types of targets is the answer to your question.
Yeah. We're at this moment in time, a couple of weeks after the war in Iran was started by the U.S., and I think initially there was some feeling that this is going to affect Russia adversely, but it's really benefited Russia in terms of the sanctions being lifted and the price of oil going up, taking the Iranian technology, and now they have a war chest to manufacture more Shahed drones, with like Russian advancements to it. For me, it's just like a really frustrating feeling, and I'm sure for Ukrainians. So much so. I mean, does it demotivate you or does it motivate you? Like, as far as the work you're doing and the time you're, committing to this, like, do you feel like, geez, we're doing all this and then now this happens?
Well, I'm kind of the wrong guy to ask that question of, because I don't get demotivated. That doesn't happen. I almost died several times for this cause, right? So I'm not somebody who's fair weather friend to Ukraine or something like that. I mean, I sold my house in Seattle and I'm moving to Kyiv for the duration of the war, so that's it tells you the depth of my fervor for this cause. But what I would say to anyone who is feeling a little discouraged is just, this war is a marathon, not a sprint. There's going to be more ups and more downs in the future. And, things look pretty bleak for Great Britain in 1941, especially before Hitler attacked the Soviet Union, before Operation Barbarossa. Well, it looked like he was going to invade Great Britain. It looked pretty sure that he was going to do that, actually. And if you're a bet man, you sure wouldn't have bet on the UK. I sure wouldn't have. It looked like the black forces of the Nazi horde were going to blot out the whole dang Earth in 1940. And yet, look what happened, right? Because people didn't give up, because good-hearted people planned for the future and stayed. They kept their heads in the game, and they realized what was at stake, and they didn't follow the sweet honeyed words of their adversaries and the useful idiots who serve their adversaries to just ignore what's happening on the other side of the world. Just, look at your own garden, look at your own backyard, pay no attention to what's going on over there. It's none of our business. Let's just worry about our own problems here. We don't have enough time or money. That's not important. Let's just ignore it. What could go wrong anyway? Let's keep our heads firmly buried in the sand. America first, right? Yeah, America only. That worked because that worked out so well before in World War II and before that in World War I. But anyway, I would encourage anybody who is discouraged to really think about this from a moral perspective, because that's how I approach things. First of all, of course, we can talk about the economic benefit to Ukraine, to America supporting Ukraine. We can talk about the political benefit to America and Western Europe supporting Ukraine, and we can talk about the legal really requirement of us after the Budapest Memorandum, after the Budapest Accords to support Ukraine. But really, I always come back to the moral argument. I mean, I think even with all our flaws, America and Western Europe are a moral society, and we believe in right versus wrong. And this is a clear case of black versus white, right versus wrong. I think that this is an all hands on deck moment for humanity to support the brave Ukrainian people while they fight and sweat and bleed and freeze and die for all of us. So I would ask your listeners to please consider my words carefully and turn off the TV, set down the beer, turn off the sports, stop doom scrolling on your phone, and get off the couch and get in the fight. You don't have to go over there and pick up a rifle like I did. You can do a lot from home. Ukraine has a lot of brave, strong men and women, very courageous, very strong men and women over there in harm's way. Honestly, they don't need more schmucks like me to go over there and pick up rifles. What they need is more Western supporters. And the good news is that with organizations like Defense Tech for Ukraine and European Action for Ukraine, anybody can get involved. Anybody can join the winning team. We've got regular weekly calls in English, French, German, Ukrainian, working on drone projects, working on counter-drone projects, working on political advocacy to better support Ukraine. There's many, many ways that people can get involved and play their role in history. And I think that it's not only our privilege, it's our duty to do this. And I'm honored to be able to stand with the brave Ukrainian people and to help ordinary Americans and Europeans get involved and do their part as well. So I hope this answered your question, Damien.
Yes, sir. And if someone does want to get involved, where can they find you or find these organizations?
Well, if they want to find me specifically, they can just contact you, and you can put them in touch with me, no problem. But if they want to join either Defense Tech for Ukraine or European Action for Ukraine, it's very simple. Just go to the websites, defensetechforukraine.org or europeanactionforukraine.org. Up at the top right of both websites is volunteer with us, join our team, those buttons. Just click the button, fill out the form, and somebody on our onboarding team will give you a call and have a little chat with you, and then maybe ask you a few personal questions, just kind of verify some personal details, and then get you added to the chats and the weekly calls. And if you're, depending on where you're located, there's a very good chance that we can meet in person. You can travel to Ukraine and visit us at our office that will be opening there. If you're in California, you can come join our investment team in Silicon Valley. If you're in New York, you can join that investment team. If you're near Boston, you can join our MIT Makerspace construction team. If you're in Seattle, you can join our Boeing team. if you're, we've got teams all over. If you're in Brussels, you can join our advocacy team there, and our drone building team there. We got people in Berlin. We got people all over. So would love to get more folks involved and engaged helping Ukraine.
Свободи сонце більше не зайде, і Україна